Good morning, everyone. Welcome to the Modern Market. This is our daily show from Monday to Friday at 7 a.m. Eastern Time, 11 a.m. GMT. We do this every single day, Monday to Friday. We talk about everything to do with the NFT market, the crypto market, and how to make some or a lot of money on the internet. Today, I'm joined by my co-hosts, Legendary and Sammy. I'm your host, B-Check. We're going to get into everything to do with the wild NFT market and crypto market in just a little bit, including the Blast market, because that season is definitely kicking off. But before we do that, just a reminder, friends, that nothing that we say here is financial advice. This modern market is exceptionally risky. We do not know anything for sure, so please do proceed with caution and exercise your own judgment. With that out of the way, Legendary, it is Monday. It is the 25th of March. How are you doing?
GM. Got back to Vienna yesterday in the evening. Had spent the weekend in the Netherlands. Had visited Zaimiri. Had a great time. Now, didn't really take a break. We talked about that before show. We were still kind of analyzing deal flow, discussing strategies, etc. But now I feel like that I'm fully back. And until I go to token 2049 in a month from now, or in a bit less than a month, in 3 weeks, I guess, no more traveling, just staying at home, staying in front of the screen.
Yeah, for real. I can't empathize more with that idea. For the first time in the whole market, there has not been a time when I've done this yet. I know other people have already got to this point, but I was up until 3 in the morning yesterday, just locking in, just locking in. There were just things I've put off way too long, and I just knew that I needed to do them, wasn't doing them. So I was like, okay, today's the day. I'm going to bite the bullet and just go late today. Sammy, how was your weekend? How are you feeling about the market? How are you doing?
I was the opposite, actually. I'm locking in this week, but had some time off over the weekend. So 99th birthday for my gran, which was very nice on Sunday. So one more to 100. That's Centurion. And then I think on the Friday, I went out, had a few beers. So I was feeling a bit rusty on Saturday. So yeah, pretty much unplugged from the market, but now fully back into it. So
very good. Nice to unplug briefly, but definitely important to get locked in again because I don't know. I felt like a real energy over the weekend, specifically towards base, specifically towards Blast. I don't know if that was only me, but we're definitely going to talk about that and whatever else we think is important as we get into the market report in just a moment. But let's do that then. Let's get into the snapshot. As always, it is pinned up top. It goes out every single day. If you do find it brings you some value, please do give it a like. Let's get into it, starting with crypto price action. We have crypto up a few percent at 67.2, ETH up a few percent at 3.4, Solana up 9% at $190. Headlines: Blast Gold begins as Blast season hot up on Plutocats, Crypto Valleys, Juice Finance. Those are just a few that caught my attention, but ultimately things heating up across the board. Blast said that distribution 2 now will come in 2 to 3 weeks. We're prioritizing dApps that utilize Blast native features, integrate with our Points API, and align with Blast long-term. dApps offering unique Blast native products will receive the most gold. Definitely feel like everyone's become a gold farmer. Gold, that's not the gold miner, a gold farmer, a gold miner in the last few days. So we're going to do a little bit of strategy and think about how we might want to be getting our hands on that gold in a bit. Number 2, Frentech points trading at more than $4 per point with size. That is absolutely outrageous. But that is what is happening. So we'll touch on that too. And finally, base TVL soars and Farcaster Degen token ripped 60% in 24 hours to a $600 million market cap. Pretty outrageous stuff there. Obviously, Degen is the token for Farcaster, which is proving pretty lucrative for being active on the Web3 social app. Getting into some price action on the NFTs, we've got CryptoPunk at 49.8, Bored Apes at 13.6, Mutants at 2.4, DGods at 1.5, Captains at 3.9, up 4%. Azuki's up 10% at 4.7 ETH. Penguins down 7% at 12.4. Mad Lads 158 Sol, and Noun's winning bid was at 6.8 ETH. We had an Ordinal Rock selling for 2.98 Bitcoin, which is almost $200,000. CryptoPunk selling for 50, and a Bored Ape Robot selling for 19.25 ETH. That is $67,000. Legendary, that is the price action. Those are the headlines. Before we get into the main sets of news, Any numbers catching your eye at the moment?
Yeah, there's two things that are catching my eye. On the one hand, as you said, Azuki's being up almost 25% over the last 7 days. But also another collection that I haven't paid attention to in quite a while, which is the CryptoPunks V1.
Oh,
I, in my mental model, had them pinned between 3 and 4 ETH most of the time, but they've been like trickling down over the last month, and I just had seen them this morning on the Blur Explore page at 2.2 ETH. So I never realized that they got that low. I always had a weak spot for the V1 punks because they kind of like their like misprint origins. So I'm definitely having a look to see if there's something around the floor that I find interesting to add to the collection.
interesting. Do you think you'd be a buyer of V1 punks anytime soon?
If there's something nice on the floor, yeah. I mean, I had a couple of them. I did sell out of the collection because I needed the capital to move into something else, but that was like over a year ago. And now I am definitely observing the listing action.
Yeah, I think that's a fair point. One of the things about punks in general is that there are actually a lot of, for whatever reason, like floor punks. So, and actually in the main collection, a lot of them have been taken off the market, which is why you can get what would have traditionally been non-floor punks at the floor, because a lot of the floor punks have been taken out of the market by things like Flooring Protocol, potentially Metastreet as well, because they needed a bunch of punks to conduct their loans against them. But yeah, there's a bunch of CryptoPunks in Flooring Protocol, for example, and if you scroll through them, they would have been all of the ones that were on the floor previously. So that's interesting to observe. Sammy, what about you on the market side? Any headline numbers catching your attention before we get into a bit of a discussion on Blast Gold?
I'd actually like to take it to Blast as well, because I think some of the NFTs on there are kind of selling. So the Crypto Valleys one, I think they were selling for quite a sizable premium to what you typically expect for stuff on Blast. I mean, I can't remember a time where there was any Blast NFT that was worth much at all. Most of the initial NFTs there were they tanked off the mint. So I've noticed that the Mintify keys as well, they've gone up in price. Like there's been a bit of FOMO there because they realize that people can get points from using the Mintify platform for both the native token, but also Blast as well. So that's been a little bit interesting. But there's a few there, but Crypto Valleys obviously stands out as the past week or so that's kind of pumped, but yeah.
Okay. Yeah. Very, very good point. You have Crypto Valleys up at 0.44. This is up. We've got this up on YouTube and live on X for the people watching in on video. So Crypto Valleys up 17% to 0.44. Let's see how many there is in this collection. We spoke about this game last week on Friday, because the gaming dynamics of it just completely took over the timeline. There's a token, you've got to plant these seeds, you've got to earn the yield, you get locked up for ages. A bit of a dangerous game to play, but a lot of people are playing it at the moment. So there are, I can't see where the supply is for this collection, but okay, here we go. 1.5k in total. So not a huge number actually available. But a 0.4 floor, they look pretty cool. And there was a high sale of 8.8 ETH, if I remember right, for the King. Does that ring a bell, Sammy?
Yeah, that's correct.
Okay, so that's pretty interesting. And then on the NFT side as well, from my side, one thing we saw pop off over the weekend was Plutocats. Look at this rise, 335% in 7 days. These were trading around 0.37, 0.38, and completely ripped up to 335%. Given that we're talking about it now, I might as well give some of the context on it. This is actually run by a couple of my friends who are in the Little Nouns team. Well, they're not on the Little Nouns team. They're Little Nouns members. They're also Nouns DAO members. And we've been chatting about what they intended to do. It's actually a really cool mechanic where you pay in order to get the NFT, but you will always be able to get your ETH back pro rata, depending on what's in the treasury. So you might not get the exact amount that you put in, but you'll get the average of how many, the total treasury divided by the number of NFTs there. So you've always got like this exit strategy and it's designed in a way to try to counter some of the issues that NounsDAO has faced, where people got upset with how the treasury was getting spent because they felt like it was their money. Whereas in this case, it's a DAO, and the whole point of you joining is to govern the yield. So you don't govern, like, say you put in 1 ETH, that 1 ETH won't literally get spent on something else. The point is all of your ETH cumulatively put together will earn yield, and you're going to try to govern how to spend that yield. So people are a little bit less possessive about, like, oh, you're wasting all my money on whatever, crazy NounsDAO proposal. So that's the idea of, like, trying to fix that dynamic, which is a really interesting concept. But basically what happened for this to go up so fast was, I think Lambo had a reasonable explanation. He said the top blast NFT is cooking hard, floor price 5x in a few hours. This was back on Friday, I think, Friday or Saturday. Blast gold distribution was just announced, and Plutocats have 63,830 gold to distribute to their 325 holders. That is insane. If they gave 100% of the blast gold to the cats, that would be 196.4 gold per Plutocat. That's very roughly 7 ETH worth of gold per NFT. I can't remember where that number's come from, but I believe that this is the number that people have been giving. So if anyone's got the link to that, that would be great. But that's where it gets interesting, because the mint is open forever. So you can always get diluted. So you can't necessarily look at it right now and be like, right, I'm definitely going to get 7 ETH if they drop me the distribution tomorrow. You have to look at it and be like, well, if another 1,000 people join, that's obviously going to be a lot less by the time the distribution comes around. So really interesting game theory taking place here. But basically it went from 325 holders, which it says here, I believe they're up to 500 or so now. So already getting diluted in that respect when it comes to the gold. Even without the gold, there's still kind of an interesting concept nevertheless. So as Lambo says, which means each NFT holder will also get less blast gold as the supply is increasing. So very interesting game theory. Sammy, I don't know if you'd heard about those dynamics, that kind of game theory. Would love to hear your thoughts and reaction.
Yeah, what is it with cats on the internet? I think back in 2021, you had mutant cats, which were trying to do that fractionalization protocol, and now it's Plutocats for this. But it does, like, the dilution aspect, it does give me a bit of PTSD from the Manta airdrop, where you had all these NFTs that were being minted. There were more coming on the market. People were trying to work out whether the value of the NFT was worth what the forecast airdrop was, benchmarking against different valuations. So I do think there is that game theory that, I mean, at the moment it sounds like a pretty good deal, but depending on how long this goes on for, it could be, yeah, like you said, you could get diluted. That's my only concern. Yeah,
I agree. So you can definitely get diluted the more people buy in terms of the gold that you're trying to get. But interestingly, the lower, I mean, because then there's the other game as well, which is the lower that you buy and the more people buy in means that the more ETH that there will be in the treasury, which should increase the amount that you'd be able to get should you wish to leave, which means that you're kind of protecting yourself in terms of your exit strategy. Just like, oh, I don't want to be in this DAO anymore. Well, okay, loads and more people have bought in, which means that pro rata, your share of the treasury has actually gone up.
Okay.
Do we know what price the mint started, and if it's like a linear progression in terms of the price escalation? Because that's really important to know how many people got in before you if you do the pro rata calculation.
Yeah, that's true. And actually, hang on, if the number's increasing at the same time, that means that even that might get diluted. I don't know. I need to run the numbers properly, but the way that the price is calculated is done on daily demand. So if there's like there's something called, it's called like VGRDA something. I don't know exactly the formula, but if like on Friday night, basically when there was insane demand, the price was just going up really, really fast. And now that it's like kind of settled, it's just started dipping again, and it seems to be coming down slowly. So I think it's one of those things we need to like look into a bit more and research perfectly. Because I'm not 100%, I wouldn't be able to stand behind some of those statements 100%. But there's definitely more going on in this interesting thing than just the potential gold. And I bet a lot of people don't know some of those details that I just shared, because I've actually read the documents and I know the people, and they told me about it. But there's more to it than just gold farming, but I suspect lots of people are just doing the gold farming. Legendary, I've heard Sammy's reaction. Would love to hear your kind of instinctive thoughts too.
Yeah, just because you mentioned the VRGDA, maybe it's helpful to take a step back and explore that pricing model a bit. It is a continuous Dutch auction. The minimum price is, as you said, dynamic, and it is equal to the Plutocat book value, so the number of Plutocats in circulation divided by the amount of ETH in reserve. So it won't dip below its book value. It will always be the minimum book value, so it can't dip below the book value to open up that arbitrage opportunity to wanting to buy in, because your pro rata exit would be higher, because minimum sale is always at book value. So that's like an additional downside protection mechanism that is in there. I think it's one of those things where it's like super profitable to be in early. I do think that do we know if they are distributing, maybe that is a question, all 100% of the gold points that they're getting? Because I've seen that the first distribution was 25% of the gold points, and I've seen that I don't know if they are distributing or wanting to distribute all of the gold points that they get. Do you happen to know that by any chance?
So yeah, I think the answer to that question is yes. Let's just go through this and make sure. So Plutocats is on its way to becoming the top PFP community on Blast, $1.3 million in the reserve, and almost 530 cats minted. This is a tweet from yesterday night, so quite late yesterday. It should be up to date. To date, the reserves had earned 3.9 million, and in developer gold totaling 63,830. So 3.9 million blast points, 63,000 gold. To prevent churn due to predictable distribution times, we are distributing rewards semi-weekly, daytime, unpredictable, and private. This first distribution includes 100% of the blast points and 25% of gold. We will continue to disperse rewards in clips as the protocol earns them. Blah, 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 blah. In the spirit of distribution, pro rata transfers of points and gold are currently en route to community members. If you hold 1% of the supply of cats, you will receive 1% of points and gold from this distribution. So it doesn't say publicly that they will do the rest, but I think it would be fair to see from that diagram.
Yeah, I mean, the 75% in future is what the diagram also reads. So I think it's fair to assume.
Yeah, I think so.
So that's it's interesting. Okay. So because if people will exit now and get the money back, then the book value goes down and then the price goes down, because maybe people are happy to take that. Like if you bought in early, let's put it like that. Let's just model this out real quick. Yep. You bought in early, price went up. You got your first 25% of gold points, and you want to exit now, you would exit at a profit because
the book value is higher than when you bought.
But if a lot of people would follow that strategy and they're like fine with that first quarter of the total pool of gold points, then the price would dip, which means that at some point, if you don't miss the next snapshot, there might be like an interesting point in time where the price has dipped enough that you wanted to come in again, and then maybe also ride the next tide of more people coming in and taking a free amount of gold points and selling at a higher book value than you got in. So I think it is more complex than I initially thought. I think that there still might be interesting. It is interesting to probably constantly watch that and do gamble a bit. I mean, it is at the end of the day a bit of a gamble if you miss a snapshot or not, if that's your timing strategy, to try to optimize for getting gold points and maybe also getting an increase in the underlying asset.
Interesting. Great points. And I do think this is one of those things that's like, you really need to think about it a lot. And we're doing this live. We've reflected on it a bit, but we are doing this live. So we're not going to get this stuff perfect instinctively. One instinctive question that I had, Legendary, maybe Sammy, you could come in on this as well, is floor price is at, to mint is now 2.16 ETH. But secondary, because then this is another element to the game. Secondary is at 1.74. So is there any incentive to mint?
So I think the difference in price is effectively what people are pricing those points they're going to get at. So the blast points. So if you look at Whales Market, you see a price for those points. So the spread between the bid and the ask is going to be effectively, you sell it at a loss, but you're hoping that you get the points that would more than offset that loss. So I think that's why there's a difference. Yeah. So someone would have done
a difference whether you mint or hold to get gold, I don't think.
So if you mint it and hold, then you'll get gold at those different tiers, I think that Legendary was talking about. But if you then sold it, but you hit the snapshot and you sold it for a loss, then the discount that, or the loss that you make, you're hoping that the points will more than offset that. So I think people are potentially playing that game as well. So it's throwing another variable in the mix, that you're assuming that those blast points are going to be valued at the same consistently. Like if they drop in value and that discount gets bigger, then people are going to make more of a loss by trying to play that game.
Interesting.
Interesting perspective. That's a very good point. Sorry for cutting you off, B. Because blast points have been dropping after the blast gold distribution news. I think we've seen now the most recent asks or sells that are going through on Whales Market pricing 100k points at 0.03 ETH. So that that's down 66% from the average on Whales Market, because 100k points used to have a going rate of 0.1 ETH. So that's like another thing to factor in. And that's only, and that's the interesting part, that's only looking at the cats in isolation. Because then the real tough question becomes, is that the wisest way to spend your money, or are other strategies, and that's probably something we'll get a bit more into this show, more interesting to do? But it's really complex. And I think you made a perfect point, BJ, and I just stole it and made a tweet out of it last week when you said in the post discussion that Blast is just eluding the lazy. You got to stay on top of what's going on.
Yeah, you're going to get diluted the hell out of if you just want to sit and Blast and have your few ETH or 0.2 or 5 or 10 or whatever. Like, this is how much you're going to get diluted. You got to stay active on this thing if you don't want to be diluted. You made a very good point, which is the kind of perk. I think someone phrased it as, what's the best way like to earn gold per ETH, like per capita almost. And we've got some tweets on that we want to get into. The final point on the Plutocats I wanted to make is that it can't only just be the spread of what people are valuing the gold points. It's also going to be to do with book value, because ultimately that secondary price can never go beneath book value, because if it does, you could buy it and sell it at book value. Although book value is always changing. So yeah, I mean, that's just another thing to factor in. Like, book value will obviously be relevant to how low the price can go potentially.
But I think if you trade it over Mintify and don't sell it back to the DAO, then you also have done volume there and will farm their points and their allocation of points. So you might want to actually put the cat to use on other platforms if there's a chance to do that.
Yeah, and just to be one final thing, like that, you can't sell it directly right now. Like, say you wanted to exit, like it's not up and running, the DAO's not up and running yet, they're still working through that. So do not buy in order to sell like immediately. Just final point there. Sammy, I think you had a final reflection here. Then we want to think about a little bit more like, right, these are some ways to earn some gold. What are the other ways? What is maybe the most efficient way as far as we know at the moment?
No, I think my point was covered sufficiently, so I'll pass it back to you guys.
Okay, let's do it. So maybe I'll do a little bit of a run through of some things that people have been doing, because it was only 7 days ago or something, maybe like 5 days ago, in case people have short memories, where people were saying there's nothing to do on Blast. Blast is useless. And I was saying, guys, just chill out. Like, chill out. Like, there will be things to do. And it's basically like a bank. Just keep your money there. There will be some stuff to do. And now suddenly there's loads of things to do. Everyone's trying to find out what to do, because there's like a little bit of a rush to it. So I'm going to do a little bit of a run through of what I have been doing, what I've been looking at, maybe ask the guys as well what they've been looking at. And then we're going to look at like what might be an efficient way to go about this thing. So NFT Stats tweeted about this Munchable project, which is kind of like on-chain companions. You've got to feed them stuff. You lock up your ETH for a certain period of time, and you have to just level up your little character over time. But Juice Finance did this interesting thing where they raised 5,000 ETH, which is a huge amount, 5,000 ETH, and all that ETH will go towards building a whale account on Munchables. And that will likely account for 20 to 25% of the total value locked on the Munch platform. So the thinking there, and I read this message in the Juice Discord, is that the way that the points accrue to Munchables is done in a way that, like, obviously the bigger your holdings, the more you will get. So you're kind of pooling together there, and then Juice will handle the distribution to you. That TVL was actually raised to 6,500 overnight, and then it got filled up again. And then they're thinking of raising it again, but it has not been raised yet. I'm not actually in this vault because I don't know, I just didn't get in time. I wanted to, and then it closed. So that's something to look at. That's kind of interesting. Number two, I wrote this tweet, which I think is very helpful. Got a lot of good engagement. I wrote a variety of things which of like different protocols that I've been looking at. Number one, I deposited some ETH into Wasabi protocol. They're a very reputable one that I've been using on mainnet too. We have Metastreet. Again, I'm kind of showing this on screen for people who are watching in, but also for the people just listening. I bridged my Metastreet loan across over to Blast, provided liquidity on Thrustify. As Sam mentioned, lock ETH in Munchables for 30 days, did a bit of that, minted a couple of Plutocats, which we've just spoken about, deposited some ETH into Juice Finance. You could borrow USDB. This was an interesting one for me that I noticed. You can borrow USDB at 5%, but then you can deposit into Wasabi protocol who pay you 20%. So it's like, well, that's a no-brainer. Unfortunately, that after I tweeted that vault got completely full as well. So there's no more capacity in that vault to borrow at 5% and earn at 20%. And then I did some trading on ambient finance. So that's a variety of things. If you want to go find that tweet and check some of those things out, it will be on my profile not too far down. Legendary, any reflections on those? Anything you've been looking at in particular? I think you made some very strong points in our Discord earlier this morning around GambleFi. I don't know if you want to speak to that.
Yeah, absolutely. Just the thing that I'm doing on Juice is taking it maybe one protocol further, also depositing ETH, borrowing USDB against that, and not putting it into the Wasabi vault, but putting it into that Hyperlock Thruster V2 vault, which basically assumes a liquidity pool position in Thruster, ETH, and USDB via Hyperlock. So by doing that, in that single vault, you earn Hyperlock points and Thruster points, which are boosted as partner points by 3x. You earn Juice points, Blast Gold points, and Blast points. So that's the most like 5-6 in one-ish strategy that I was able to find that I'm doing. Apart from that, I do also have significant exposure to Wasabi directly, as well as to Blade Swap. I do think that if you look at the Blade at the Blast, not Blade, Blast Gold point distribution, you'll see that DEXs are highly favored in at the rate that they are accruing gold points. And on top of that, what I've also been doing excessively is farming it on YOLO games. I think YOLO games is really interesting because they are taking only a 1% rake in their games, apart from Poke the Bear, which is I think a 3% rake, but they're also redistributing that to players. I mean, some of it via obviously the lottery mechanism, but some of it will be straightforward claims. And on top of that, they do have, I think, the fourth highest gold point allocation. If you just compare that to the cats, they got 384,000 points. And I do think that there's a lot of merit to that, just because you can basically play games like Poke the Bear, which are essentially a coin flip. And if you play that often enough, you will end up winning half, losing half, plus minus your, obviously, your variance that you will have on that. But then you also have the upside on earning some of the rake back that you paid to the house, that you will make a good amount of gold points. And obviously on top of that, that YOLO, they do return like 100% of the points to the player base, that they also will do a token. And just seeing how Gamblify tokens did with Shuffle or Rollbit, and just seeing that's one of the most actively used platforms, I do think that this is a highly EV positive strategy, apart from using the DeFi ecosystems, because my gut feeling is that like some people who don't necessarily like gambling won't touch a platform that is Gamblify, and probably won't have a deeper look to see if there's actually an EV positive strategy to gambling, not because you're beating the house, which obviously is impossible, but just because the rewards are outsizing the rake that you're losing to the house, which was a very similar thing with Shuffle. Like every dollar that you lost on Shuffle, except if you were a Giga Whale, you got back multiple times if you farmed it in low volatility games. So I do think that there's merit to exploring that.
Very, very interesting. And as you say, you've kind of been through that process with Shuffle as well. You kind of realize like, damn, the value in these protocols, even if you lose a little bit, probably make it. Now, obviously that's a dangerous, it's a potentially dangerous way to think about it, but ultimately you've got to run the numbers and make the decision for yourself. It seems to have worked out for you at least one time. So interesting to see how you do that with YOLO as well. Okay, so what we're going to do now, we're going to go over Blast Distribution 1 to see some of the numbers, get some top line reflections of that. Then we're going to talk about the kind of the most efficient way to allocate. Then we will look at season 2. I don't know if they call it distribution 2. That's how I should refer to it. So starting with Blast Gold Distribution 1, Blur wrote this article, which I don't know how many people read. But it's basically here, it says that, as you said, Legendary, DEXs are very, very much favored. Big Bang winners were very much favored as well with this initial drop of allocations. You got Thruster, Sin Futures, Ambient Finance, Juice Finance, all at the top. YOLO Games, actually very, very high up. Not a DEX, obviously, but the 5th highest recipient of total gold. So that's pretty impressive. Crypto Valley's the game we were talking about on Friday, the 6th highest recipient of gold. So this is very interesting to see, and I recommend people just taking a scroll down this list, not only for 2 reasons. One, to get a sense of like what numbers are where, but also to get a sense of like, okay, let me go and try out something different. Because what we're going to notice on this timeline now, we're already noticing and moving forward, is certain people who have invested in particular things will take over the timeline with that one thing, and it's going to make you feel like it's the only thing available. But I bet you, this always happens, the best things people will not be tweeting about. Like there will be like absolute winners on this list that no one will tell you about because they're keeping all the gold for themselves. So if you want to win in this market, you're going to have to take a look at this at some point. Sammy, would love to come to you first. Have you managed to take a look at this? What was your reflection on the kind of distribution between Big Bang Gold and Mainnet DApp Gold for these protocols, and any thoughts on where you'd want to allocate your attention?
Yes, it's definitely a valid point about what you're hearing on the timeline, because there's a lot in there that you don't necessarily see talked about. Even towards the lower end, like that were allocated from the Big Bang, I think Rogex is on there, and that's like a perps platform that I was actually pretty impressed with the product, and I quite enjoyed using it when it was in beta on testnet. Cambria's on there. That seems to be quite high up. That's a game that was on base, so like a PvP Jewel Arena game. Sure. And actually, people aren't just farming gold and stuff and points on there. They're farming party hats and these tradable items that became rare in the previous RuneScape game, but they think that it's going to follow the same trend this time around. So I think party hats are selling for around about $1,000 each at the moment, OTC. So like there's stuff in there that you can make money without just through the gold and the blast points as well. There's other ways of making money, and even just like doing profitable trades on some of these perp protocols, or having like a what's it called, like a systematic way of trying to do these things like YOLO games and the gambling platforms just makes sense. Like there will be ways that you're on probability, you're statistically likely to do okay. Whilst also farming points. But District 1 was another one. That's a social media platform that actually had a DM from them over the weekend. So I need to look into that. But they mentioned something about getting that up and functioning. So that might be worth a look, because I haven't seen anyone talk about that. And that's pretty high up the list in terms of the number of points or blast gold that they've got.
Yeah, so, really interesting stuff. I think there's going to be multiple ways to skin this cat. Like, I don't think you need to think, this is just my instinctive impression, I don't think you need to think, oh my God, I'm not in crypto valleys, the whole timeline's talking about it, I've completely screwed up on blast, like there's no, like I'm done for. It's like, no, it's been a few days and you're not in one of the main things, but there's just going to be so many different ways to attack this. So I would not worry about that too much. Legendary, any reflections on this initial list in terms of your strategy?
Yeah, I'd almost take the opposite point of that FOMO feeling and be like, I'd look at every protocol that has, say, more than that 60K or more than that 60K point threshold, and try to look at the protocols that they've never heard about before or that they've never seen on the timeline. Because as you said, there's no point in trying to jump on a game that, while it might have 200K points distributed to it, but everyone on the timeline is talking about it, then unless you have another additional strategy because you're farming hats or something else, it might not be the best thing to do. That is definitely interesting, to explore protocols that people are just not really talking about but using. And then I think the true complexity will be to understand that, like, synergistic farming, as we spoke about with Juice Finance, where you can farm points and tokens at more than one single touch point at once. And that is where ultimately, I think, where you won't be, where the info that you get publicly is not sufficient, where you will have to reach out to someone on the team. I don't think it's known, for example, the Juice Hyperlock thing I just talked about. I don't know how points are accumulated from the partner protocols exactly. I don't know the underlying formula. And I think if you really want to go deep, you do have to reach out to the people and try to talk to the teams or people working there. And I also do think that this is where then the alpha is, because doing whatever on the timeline does can be a very profitable strategy. We've seen that with Portal. We probably will see that with block games and gaming as well. But also just looking at things that people are not talking about, whether that's now protocols on Blast or protocols in general. Look at something like Webverse. Not really a lot of talk on the timeline, but it did then come out a token at a massive valuation, albeit the circulating supply is a bit low. So I do think there's merit to both strategies. Like, I used to be basically counter trade the timeline, not counter trade, but like focus on things that the timeline is not talking about. But I think it's also not the wisest thing to ignore the attention that people are giving to something. But both strategies are really valid. And probably the optimum is if you can combine those two, because you find a protocol that also gives you points, but nobody talks about it, but also lets you earn points for some of the more popular protocols.
Yeah, I think that's interesting. I mean, ideally, maybe this is the ideal scenario. You do the research, you discover the thing that's really early and that no one's talking about yet. Then you get other people to come and do it and participate with you and leverage the attention. And then everyone goes crazy about it, but only after you've like figured it out and know the best strategy and have done all the strategies you wanted to do first. That's probably the ideal scenario. Okay, really interesting tweet here we've got from David Choi, the founder of Metastreet, dealing with exactly the question we had in mind. It's just like, how do you leverage your ETH in the most efficient way to get gold? I haven't crunched the numbers on this, haven't confirmed it, verified it, but I would love to hear your guys' thoughts on it, because it comes to some interesting conclusions, kind of talking about like, oh, which one has the most attention, which one has the most TVL. But the thing is, the more TVL there is, the more likely that some of your gold is going to go to other people, right? Because you're getting diluted. So this is dealing with some of that game theory. I'm going to read it out. I'm also sharing it for the people who are watching online. So he says, I did the math for you. This is how much 1 gold cost you on the right per category. And he says the cheaper, the better, obviously, because you want to be accumulating your gold at the lowest dollar amount possible. Each category is very different though, e.g. perps TVL doesn't matter as much as your trading volume. So he made that point. So this headline diagram that he's kind of shared says, for example, Juice Lending gets 384,000 gold. Gold per dollar is 0.0036. So that is so dollars per gold. Sorry, that's the way around. You probably want to think about it. Is $274 per gold because of the amount of gold it's got available, because of its TVL. Something like Orbit Lending, which actually has one of the biggest TVLs, right? Also has one of the biggest amounts of gold, but the TVL is so huge at 349 million. There, the dollar per gold is $1,556 per gold. So on the one hand, you're thinking, oh, it's got a great TVL, it's really, really high, that's good. And it probably means it is good, because it probably means it's a good protocol. But in terms of thinking of it in terms of its gold, you're not getting much gold for your dollars there. Let's contrast that with something much lower, for example, where ambient finance, let's just take that as an example, trading on-chain swaps with ambient finance, they've been given 465,000 gold. The TVL is 26 million. So the dollar per gold is $56 compared with Juice, which was 274, compared with Orbit, which was 1,550. So obviously you want to spend as little as possible for the gold if this is the game that you want to play. Blast Futures, $20 per gold. Spacebar, $65 per gold. Metastreet, $50 per gold. Ring Protocol, another one with a huge TVL at 297 million, is at $1,940 per gold. Mangrove, Sammy, we were talking to Mangrove not long ago, backed by really good people, $9 per gold. You need to get a Mangrove. Is that like, Sammy, what are your thoughts here when we're going through some of these numbers? Very interesting conclusion, interesting way to think about it. Want to hear your thoughts, and also want to hear from Legendary on this.
Yeah, to be honest, it's the first time I've actually seen this spreadsheet, but it makes sense. But I do think that where you look at some of those dollars per gold, like if you look at the perps and that kind of trading platform, there is more risk involved. So people with a lot of capital, they're unlikely to take significant bets with large sums of capital in a direction, because they could lose quite a significant amount of money. So just dumping it into a lending protocol or one of those protocols at the top, it makes more sense. So just in terms of comparing between the different segments, it's probably not apples for apples.
That's a good point.
But it depends on your risk appetite. And if you have a very low amount of capital, there's ways of probably using some of these other protocols that do have higher risk to maximize your gold. And then the whales would have a different strategy.
Sure. Interesting point. Legendary, is it, I think I completely agree with Sammy. It's unfair to use TVL. It's unfair to use dollar per gold and TVL as the kind of key metrics for a trading platform, because your activity is based on your trading, not the TVL, right?
Yeah, and TVL is only a metric that works with protocols where you can deposit money into, right? So something like YOLO that we talked about wouldn't even show up there, because you're not depositing money into that. I do think it's interesting if you look at it in isolation. Like if you compare different dexes, you look at something like Thruster, you look at Blade Swap and Blaster Swap, which are tools that I've been putting more money into that have like significantly cheaper gold point ratios, with Blaster being at $19. I think it's also important if you look at the value of one gold point. Right now, one gold point equals 35,000, roughly 35,000 regular points. And if you want to buy 35,000 points on Whales Market, you would now pay $36 for that. So you could basically, as it stands in this moment of time, see the economic value of one gold coin at $36. I do think that only maximizing for gold points is very short-sighted though. Like I do find this a very helpful chart, and that's nothing against the chart or Dave at all, because the chart is super helpful and perfect. But I do think you also want to keep in mind the APY that you're earning on those platforms, the native tokens that they will do. Now you might, for example, if Thrust does a token and the smaller DEX does a token, and you pay, quote unquote, pay more or have to put in more money to work to get a gold point, but you get a token of the biggest DEX versus, you know, the third largest or the super small DEX, that token might be worth more. And then that is also something like that we touched on the show before, is what about the protocols like Juice, where you have vault strategies that let you earn points from 3 different sources and potentially 3 different tokens at once. And then also like the things that Sam had mentioned before with gaming, where you have additional things to farm apart from the gold points. So I think if you purely maximize gold, this is a very helpful thing to look at. But I also think that just maximizing gold points is not the most efficient or not the optimum strategy to make the most buck with Blast at this moment in time.
Very, very fair point. Just like the previous game theory we were speaking about before, like there's more at play here, right? We know because we've invested in Juice here, which looks like it should be a good investment, and that doesn't really matter. Like gold doesn't matter to that, right? Like and in the same way, lots of people who've deposited into Juice who will be getting the Juice token, like, yeah, fine, they're getting less gold, but they're part of probably realistically according to this chart anyway, the top lending protocol it's not by TVL, maybe the second or third top lending protocol on Blast. So that's going to mean something. Orbit lending with a huge TVL of 350 million, like I think their token actually works differently, to be honest. But the point is they will have valuable tokens in and of themselves, irrespective of gold. I want to actually just continue with this thread because he goes on to provide some other context, and then I want to do the Web3 roundup, and then maybe we'll touch on something else to close the show. He said some games are virtually impossible to measure. So you actually mentioned this already, Legendary, against TVL, like YOLO games. So it's impossible to measure that in this way. He says, in reality, it doesn't actually matter, because what the main goal is, how far can your dollar go across multiple deposits? For example, if you use Metastreet, Thruster, and Particle, then your gold per deposit goes way low, like sub $1. So this is the point of, like, when you use multiple, your gold per dollar goes down. Perps are a bit harder to integrate and loop since they're not tokenized. A good example is when Juice Finance does it natively on their website. So I'd recommend routing the cheapest cost per section each time you go through a yield route. How valuable are these actions? They're worth $3 billion of deposit capital. It's 50-50 for Blast points and Blast gold. Yeah, your stackable points matter a lot, as well as doing some ecosystem strategies. A small fish can make more than Justin Sun. We kind of alluded to that, and how you can get diluted by being a lazy whale. And this is the final conclusion. Don't be lazy. I warned this day one. When Pac-Man gives you points, you make points. Lemonade. Your paths to win gold are generate as much volume on perps as possible, degen loop in the ecosystem, and play a lot of the new games. I think the distribution is actually pretty fair. It rewarded the innovation and on-chain actions the most and helped bring eco projects to work together. It won't always be like this. Their guidances matter. Reread their post twice. Legendary, any reflections on that?
Yeah, I think that's super helpful. Also, the last point that David made on the combined strategies, how obviously he's using Metastreet, his own platform, as an example, combined with Thruster, how you would have gotten your gold price down significantly. I think one final point I would like to add to that was from the future distributions paragraph in the blog article that we went through earlier. That said, currently only dApps receive gold, but future distributions will also include Blast native asset holders, ERC20s, ERC721s, etc., which obviously will add more complexity to it if then you also have like natively gold distributions coming your way for the USDP or ETH that you're holding, but also NFTs can get extra gold themselves. So that will be more complex then.
Yeah, very, very good point. Maybe we'll conclude on that in a second, like looking forward now. But let's just get you to the Web3 Roundup to get you up to speed with everything else that's been happening in the space in the last 48 hours, as well as always is from the snapshot, which is pinned up top. Let's do it. So the EU imposes some limitations on self-custody wallets for business payments. On the headline, people reacted like really wildly to that over the timeline. I wouldn't go as far as say it's fake news, but it's definitely not what people think. So you'd need to read a little bit more into that to really understand what that was. Number two, Node Monkeys flip market cap of Bored Apes. Again, Puppets flip market cap of Mutant Apes. Ordinals still performing very, very strongly. Howdy Hats on Solana up to 9 SOL in anticipation of today's drop of Howdy. This is by a prominent artist on Solana, Crypto Pop Punk. Finally, largest airdrop in Ordinals history, Game Stones being sent to 112,777 wallets. I believe that's related to Runestones, but I would need to double check. Find some more news. $600,000 loan against a zombie CryptoPunk was originated on Gondi. That's pretty cool to see. Kevin Hart sells his Bored Ape for a 66 ETH loss. And finally, famous selfie taker Ghazali collects more than 400 ETH in meme coin pre-sale on Base. It's just the pre-sales just won't stop. And if you keep giving them money, they just won't stop, guys. So maybe that'll stick around for a little bit. We had a little break over the weekend, but it looks like we're going to continue that a little bit more. We haven't had much time to talk about other headlines today, but so I think it makes sense to just close the loop on Blast. We've spoken about distribution one, how to get more gold, what might be efficient ways of thinking about it, whether or not you should be focusing on gold, because actually all these tokens are going to have protocols as well. So there's multiple ways to play this game. But just as a final way to conclude, they also tweeted that distribution 2 is up next. There's a few core details, which I'll get Legendary and Sam's reflections on in just a moment, but I'll take you through them. So they say Blast Gold is intended to promote dApp development by enabling dApps to reward users with gold. The expectation is that all gold will go to users. So that's one thing for you just to note. Gold will be distributed to a wide range of dApps. They point out, vet dApps before you use them. Each dApp will distribute gold differently. There's not going to be one easy way. And that's why Legendary mentioned, like, you're going to have to do some research here. It's going to be, finding out things from founders specifically, because they're not all going to do the same things. Now, this is important. Distribution 2 will come in 2 to 3 weeks. This was tweeted 3 days ago. We're prioritizing dApps that utilize Blast native features, integrate with our Points API, and align with Blast long-term. dApps offering unique Blast native products will receive the most gold. One of the interesting things we heard is that like some a protocol like Wasabi, which is like really well respected, quite prominent, had their points reduced because they simply for existing on Ethereum beforehand, simply for existing on other platforms. So that's happening at the moment. So Blast native dApps will be prioritized. Currently, only dApps receive gold, but future distributions will also include, and this is the important thing Legendary said, holders of Blast native assets like ERC20s, ERC721s. One of the things I did was I claimed my Pac Moon airdrop, and I was like, well, I'm not going to get rid of that because I saw this tweet. So I just chucked that into Wasabi, and now I'm holding the Pac Moon airdrop, and maybe that's going to mean something moving forward. I don't know. Legendary, final reflections on that. We're coming to the close of the show. Interesting to look forward there. How are you looking forward for Blast Gold Distribution 2?
Yeah, I think you mentioned the key point, the Blast unique things, protocols that simply don't exist on other L2s being favored. Makes a lot of sense from a business perspective. Obviously, if you have a really cool protocol and people want to use that and they can use it on Arbitrum Optimism and all other L2s, it's a bit more difficult to retain users versus if that protocol only exists on Blast. So I absolutely understand the motivation behind that. And then there was one more point that appeal to report people who, or protocols who distribute points in Discords or who create basically liquid proxies for gold points that try to somehow make gold points tradable, which kind of says like if it's more intransparent how it is being distributed, it is more interesting. And that was also the point that I took away from Dave's long form post, that you simply can't really do the math on some of the protocols that don't have TVLs. And I do think that there's going to be a lot of interesting opportunities there, because if you can take a calculated risk and you know what you get for your money, that's one thing. But if you simply see a protocol that has a shit ton of points, but you don't really know how it's going to distribute them, maybe less people will do that, and it might be worth to interact with some of those protocols a bit as well.
Yeah, very interesting stuff. I think all of those points are valid. We're going to stay on top of this as we move forward. Blast is not going away. Definite excitement over the weekend. I felt it on the timeline as we kind of ramp up into next month and into May, when that first drop is going to come. So we'll stay on top of it. Hope you enjoyed the show. Let us know. It was a bit more of a Blast heavy show, a bit more strategic, a bit technical in some respects. So let us know how you enjoyed that. But we hope you did enjoy and found some value in it. As always, I am your host, B-Check. Thank you so much to my legendary co-host, Legendary, and Sammy. Thank you to our speakers, Roman, Oxy, and anyone else who contributed today. But there might not have been anyone, because I think we just talked the whole time. Apologies for that. And thank you so much for joining us, everyone. As always, we will be back with you again tomorrow, 7 a.m. Eastern time, to go through everything in the NFT and crypto market. Take care. Have a wonderful day. Bye-bye.